Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you all gratefully on our 2 days conference accompanying the exhibition on Dizziness, which we have at the moment at the CCA Ujazdowski Castle. As you have a chance to see it already during the tour at the exhibition, I'm aware that you are familiar with the show already. But I would like to welcome all participants and our guests, of those who join us tonight and I hope as well tomorrow. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our director Małgorzata Ludwisiak to say a few words and welcome you in Warsaw in CCA. So, Małgorzata, microphone is yours.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. And I'm not going to give any boring director's speeches. I just want to say how excited I am and that this exhibition has happened in the castle, in the CCA, and that within the framework of the exhibition this conference happens. And we all hope to also learn from you and from the discussions which hopefully would happen during this 1 day and a half. I think that what we are doing, the show which we owe to the curators Ruth Anderwald, Leonhard Grond, and Katrin Bucher-Trantow, and the conference which is co-organized also with the help of Konrad Schiller. What we are doing is it's quite, I would say, critically important in so rapidly changing reality around us, and so many things have changed even since the opening of the exhibition. So facing the global crisis, the crisis of the Western-centered model of the world, probably the crisis of European Union, and thousands of other crises related to that processes. I think it's crucial nowadays to look for intellectual tools to describe what's happening, and also intellectual tools to possibly find solutions, as well as artistic tools, because that's what exhibition is about, and some of the presentations tomorrow, basically. I wanted to thank once again the curators of the show and Konrad for co-organizing the conference. I wanted to thank all of you for receiving and accepting our invitations, and also to the organizations that helped to make it happen. Ist Kunsthaus Graz, ist it's Bundeskanzleramt Österreich. There is also we are very happy to have a honorary patronage of Austrian Embassy and organizational and financial help of Austrian Culture Forum. I think we should just not to lose more time. We should just start our discussion. Thank you.
So, can I have Jaroslaw Lubiak with the first presentation titled Semantics of Dizziness. Enjoy the talk. Jaroslaw, floor is yours.
Thank you, and I will be speaking in Polish, so please put your earphones. Na początku chciałbym przywołać pracę, która jest filmem.
At the beginning, I would like to cite a work which is a video, but which also appears as part of the exhibition, a kind of disruptive element. The work by Ruth Anderwald and Leonhard Grond, Dizziness is My Name. It features a repetitive refrain which seems particularly important for me as the point of departure for my statements. And the refrain goes as follows: Dizziness is my name, I am a pendulum without rope and gravity. My gravity is movement. And at the very end of the work, we have the following words. Here's what I, Dizziness, have to offer you. Confusion guided by a clear sense of purpose. Leave shadowed what was lost. Hold on to your purpose and hold on to hope. The work is much longer. These are only fragments. The video itself, which is presented on the website of the project, has a beautiful poetics, which is justified insofar as metaphorization is the main method, the main research method that Ruth and Leonhard use. In fact, this method is strictly related to the phenomenon being studied. One of the movements in this metaphorization is to give dizziness a proper name, and this is a very powerful move. Ruth and Leonhard suggest that dizziness is not a concept, as if they were saying, you will never understand it, all you can do is encounter it. You can discover its many faces, look at it, listen to it, but you will never earn the privilege of understanding what it is. Thus, dizziness is the name of what disrupts possibilities of communication. Understanding it suspends all certainty. Dizziness is not a concept because it disrupts our ability to comprehend. Ruth and Leonhard have used prosopopeia in their video in order to give voice to dizziness. Dizziness speaks to us in a female voice, but we cannot be certain if it's a woman or if it's a person at all. In the video, dizziness talks to us. In other situations, it sends us signals, signs, symptoms. In the exhibition here at the center, it shows us its many faces, some of its countless faces which are revealed through its own proper name. The semantics of proper names have always been troublesome for the theory of meaning. The discussion around whether proper names have meaning, as John Searle says, can be limited to two options. The first presupposes that proper names don't have a meaning, only reference. They denote but do not connote. And the second option is that they do have sense and references are accidental. We can accept that proper names function in this ambiguity. Proper names have a deep meaning, but at the same time it operates through its superficial references. Ruth and Leonhard draw strength from this ambiguity by giving dizziness the status of a proper name, and they also assign the effects of that name to the phenomenon. Searle, who did not distinguish unequivocally between sense and reference, analyzes how proper names function. First of all, he says that they refer to a specific object without a need to define it or assigning any predicates to it. Proper names make references without raising the issue of what the object is, so Searle writes. Lacan adds psychoanalytical consequences to this and emphasizes that proper names cover a lack, namely the impossibility of identifying the object. The proper name allows us to avoid the question of what the object is in situations where the answer to that question is by definition impossible. At the same time, it includes that impossibility by inserting the object within a symbolic system. At the same time, because the proper name is related to a lack, it's a movable function, as Lacan calls it, it's easy to use it to effect a series of transitions. Ruth and Leonhard activate a chain of synonyms through which dizziness moves. Vertigo, Taumel, dizziness, chaos, confusion, disorientation, error, crisis, emergence, creation. Dizziness is not a name for any of these, but can refer to all of them, at least for the moment before it shifts to its next destination. One of the key features assigned by Lacan to proper names is impossibility of translation. So it indicates a specific object. Confusion has accompanied us from the very beginning. In order to face up to the dizziness, we have to make names, reinstate their status as words. Ruth and Leonhard used the German term Taumel, dizziness in English, whose meanings are not overlapping, they are not the same. And the translation into Polish adds more elements of difference. The most obvious translation is zawrót głowy, which is dizziness in the medical sense. There's also imbalance, but here we lose the medical connotation. Moreover, one of the key meanings of Taumel is not present in its Polish or English equivalent. It's a meaning that the Grimm brothers define as a circular movement to and fro. Only later do we get the element of dizziness, confusion, and so on. Whereas the Polish and English terms designate a state, Taumel points to a distinct kind of movement, a swerving, circling, stumbling, and so on. Movement is a key element of the whole project for Ruth and Leonhard. In the absence of a Polish word that would convey this, the title Taumel navigieren im Unbekannten, Dizziness navigating the unknown, we decided to put emphasis on sort of the shared feature and a moment that makes us react and act. Hence the Polish translation as loss of imbalance. In fact, translating the title of the exhibition was like giving another name to Taumel, dizziness. And the relationship here between these words is one of kinship but not identity. The exhibition here at the center is different from the one presented at Kunsthaus Graz. It fills a different space, creates a different kind of experience, includes different works also by Polish artists, Polakowski, Delman, and the relationships between the works are also constructed differently. So the new title is not accidental. Like at Kunsthaus Graz, it is an encounter with something that escapes specific terminology. A metaphorization, which is so important to Ruth and Leonhard, is continued in this exhibition. If Dizziness in My Name was a literal prosopopeia, the exhibition is more of a metaphorical prosopopeia. It gives voice to dizziness, portraying it through various visual arts. At the same time, it's an attempt to reflect on the possibilities that dizziness offers. Dizziness, the exhibition, is also an experiment within a research project. The project itself is unique, as opposed to other art studies which have recently become so popular in modern art. In my view, this is because of the methodology used, in which continual metaphorization allows the researchers to draw consequences from the fact that Taumel means movement above all. In the Ujazdowski program, dizziness serves as a counterpoint to the exhibition's dirt, common spirits, or Gotong Royong, the things we do together. In all of these projects, it was key to introduce a non-European point of view on the most burning issues of modernity, which was supposed to guide us towards a different way of thinking. Ruth and Leonhard's project gives us a possibility to think differently within the European tradition by introducing radical transference. And this is the value, the true value of the project. The key to this research is the notion of movement and its consequences inherent in the word Taumel, which allows us to affect this metaphorization. So at first glance, this the whole project seems metaphorical, and as we move from neurology to psychology of perception to philosophy, social anthropology, rituals, political destabilization, economic crises, artistic exploration of imbalance, both in the physical and psychological sense. In any other field, this would denote methodological chaos. But in Anderwald and Grond's artistic research, this unity of the method and the object really make the value of this project. The project also develops a movement within European continental thought, which is exemplified in the philosophical work of the likes of Catherine Malabou. Malabou proposes a certain transference, which could be called the neurological treatment of reason, treating the brain as the basis of a materialist theory of thinking. This does away with the Enlightenment idea of rationality, which was key for the construction of our societies and which is now in crisis. In one of her last books devoted to Kant, Malabou postulates creating a different type of rationality, and here let me cite from this work. This rationality goes beyond the critique of reason and refuses to legitimize thinking simply on the grounds of the exposition of its intrinsic conditions of possibility. Philosophical discourse can no longer result from the consciousness of laws, nor can concepts or judgments be founded on spontaneity of thinking. Instead, it is a matter of understanding from which non-conscious, not necessarily human, and not programmed formative instances thinking derives. The philosophical turn from the 20th to the 21st century is thus notable for the in-depth search for the origin of thinking outside of consciousness and will. End of quote. Ruth and Leonhard ask about the sources of thinking outside consciousness and will. Or, more strictly speaking, they conduct a radical search for these other sources. They go further than Malabou because they do not stop at the neurology of the brain, this privileged organ of thinking. They seek sources of thinking in the labyrinth, or in the sense of balance, this specific sense which is sensitive both to linear and angular acceleration. It's also our sense of getting in touch with the ground. It's also related to sight and the whole nervous system. Without this cooperation, keeping our balance would be impossible. Nevertheless, this physiology of the labyrinth of the inner ear and studying its disturbances, its diseases, was the departure point for Anderwald and Grond's project. Departing from the labyrinth through metaphorization, they got to the question of loss of balance, of dizziness in today's reality. How do we orient ourselves when we lose the ground under our feet? When dizziness tells us in the video that it's free of gravity, we could say that this is a call to thinking that is not founded on any foundation, but instead draws on the possibilities of indefinite, stumbling, circular, dizzy movements. In other words, a different type of rationality. So I'm hoping that we would get closer to such a new rationality while asking about how communities find their balance. And I think this is particularly needed both in our local context and given the global insecurities of today. The socio-political dizziness that we are experiencing in Poland might have been called the victory of irrationality, but we need to find different tools of understanding and reacting. A different type of rationality, not limited to reason. A rationality immersed in the experience of dizziness might serve us some clues. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. If we can continue as we start a bit off schedule, can I introduce Ruth Anderwald and Leonhard Grond, and floor is yours. So, half an hour time allocation.
Hello.
Hello. Just very shortly, thank you very much for organizing the exhibition, the film screenings and this event. We are very lucky to be here and very happy to be here also.
We are Ruth Anderwald and Leonhard Grond as artist curators, artists and artistic researchers. We are working since 1999 in the fields of moving image art, photography, artistic research, and art in the public space. Welcome to the symposium. We are very glad to be here. In 2014, we initiated the artistic research, Dizziness a resource. But without all our contributors, it would be not possible to bring this research so far. And also today we have contributors who joined the event, and we are really looking forward to the contributions.
So, what is Dizziness a resource? It is a transnational cross-disciplinary artistic research project that, and we've heard it already from Jaroslaw, explores the subject of Taumel, or in the English translation, dizziness, in visual art, in artistic and curatorial practice, in philosophy and through cultural natural sciences. Specifically, the project asks if states of dizziness can be regarded a resource, and if so, under which conditions. We understand dizziness as a phenomenon of embodied knowledge, blurring the categorization between the perception and the conception of dizziness. Therefore, the phenomenon was investigated not only in its visceral experience, but also in its reflection. And we had a focus on dizziness in the individual for the last 3 years, and now we're looking forward to open this focus on modes of togetherness. And we can confirm that dizziness breaks up the given, be it habits, beliefs, preconceptions, or patterns, creating space and dynamics between established categories and perceived oppositions. In this sense, dizziness can be regarded a resource. It provides power and dynamic to restructure, rethink, and redesign the given.
Having reached this point, we would like to widen the research perspective to the communal aspects of dizziness. We propose to deliberate the implication of dizziness and of the possible resourcefulness on modes of togetherness, be it for small groups and communities, be it on larger scales, for organizations, or even societies. In order to give an idea of the connectivity of the terms balance, togetherness, and dizziness, we would like to quote the famous French funambulist Charles Blondin, who walked on a tightrope over Niagara Falls many times. Before he started carrying his friend and manager, Harry Colcourt, over the falls, he asked of him, "Until I clear this place, be a part of me, mind, body, and soul. If I sway, sway with me.
To begin with, we will shortly define dizziness from the viewpoint of the project Dizziness resource, moving on to summarize part of its findings. An important achievement, also with regard to balancing togetherness, was the identification of the composable space that we will explain with examples. And tomorrow, philosopher Caroline Feiertag will go into further detail on the notions of composability and the composable space from her philosophical point of view. In addition, we will exemplify the applied methodology and cross-disciplinary artistic research practice, and we will show some of the related artworks, some of us, but also of other artists. From Jaroslaw, we have already heard about the cultural differences and about the semantics surrounding dizziness, and indeed, finding an appropriate terminology for what we aim at in our research was not only our starting point, but is still part of an ongoing process. The term dizziness was challenged again and again through the different disciplines throughout the project's trajectory, evaluating its implications and exploring its functionality and appositeness. And through that, we were able to establish it as an operational term, at least, for artistic research practice.
Defining dizziness, in fact, started from its medical definition as symptom. A symptom cannot be measured from the outside, but only described by the experiencing subject. As a medical symptom, dizziness is ambiguous and can lead to a multitude of diagnoses, from intoxication to low blood sugar, ear infection, abnormal blood pressure, hyperventilation, anxiety disorder, indication of a heart attack, migraine, neural dysfunction, or dysfunction of the balance system. What is our balance system? The vestibular system is the sensory apparatus that signals the coordinates of our spatial position to the brain, affording our sense of balance and spatial orientation. Our balance organ, the inner ear, is located between the eye and the ear. It's around here, yeah. The vestibular system, together with the cochlea, constitutes the labyrinth of the inner ear, sending signals primarily to the neural structure that control our eye movements, and the muscular system that keeps us upright and balanced. We get dizzy when an impairment in perception arises. In motion sickness, on a boat for instance, the visual perception, all is calm, absence of visual movement. And the perception of the vestibular system, detecting constant movement, are contradictory, which makes us dizzy. The brain reacts to this contradictory information as if you were poisoned. You might feel as if the surroundings are moving and you feel sick and your body movements are becoming increasingly unbalanced and unhinged.
One of the artists we immediately contacted when starting this research was Joachim Köster, and we spoke in depth about the notion of dizziness in regard to his work and also in regard to what we were aiming at. And he told us then that he believes that every muscular contraction has an origin and a history, which is also this idea of memories sitting in the body or events leaving sediments in the body. Throughout the course of the project, we have treated dizziness as a phenomenon of embodied knowledge, towing in its wake questions of medical and psychological research, as well as philosophical and artistic implications and considerations. We see dizziness as part of the gamut of the physical, psychological, and metaphorical experience of being human. Psychobiological research affirms this connectivity between our ability to maintain emotional and corporeal equilibrium. The dizzy individual is exposed to an emotional maelstrom involving sensations of exhilaration, anxiety, disorientation, and alienation. Moreover, being out of kilter, feelings of alienation towards the self and or the world increase. Dizziness reduces predictability and thus our ability to exercise control. And it increases feelings of exposedness and vulnerability.
Yet we shall put aside the emotional spectrum of dizziness for now and follow the staggering movement of the dizzy body. Every morning for the first weeks into the research creation project, we each, in turn, spun until falling down dizzily, particularly interested in constituting the ephemeral moment of a spinning person's simultaneous moving, upright, and falling. This is the turning point, the superposition of keeping upright and falling, the precise temporal and spatial moment of the superposition of motion and standstill. Or, as French philosopher calls it, François Schiller calls it, thank you, the composibility of motion and standstill. After Schiller, composibility involves creating a space of ambiguity where established oppositions blur to possibly form anew. As artists, we are particularly interested in the depiction of this moment, where falling and moving upright become compossible, possible together. While spinning and observing the other spin, it soon became clear that one can see the other person stumbling and falling, but no outward sign indicate the quality of the other's experience of dizziness, nor when or if the other person will fall. Intrigued by this observation, we began to work on data for 3D models. With the help of an iconic, a leading photogrammetry studio in Istanbul, we spun, one after the other, to the point of falling, surrounded by the studio's cage of 100 cameras. After quite a few failed efforts, Iconic was finally able to record snapshots of us to print 2 photo sculptures models.
So here we see the figurines. You can't exactly see it because the glove is under it, but my figurine cannot stand. Velocity only stabilized my moving body into an upright position. And for me, it also exposes my illusion of being in control over my body movements while I'm, in fact, already entering the fall.
In both studies, the unpredictability of the dizzy body's expression is visualized. Indeed, I was falling backwards the moment the photo was taken. However, my figurine's poise appeared balanced and stable because my movements before and after the snapshot cannot be anticipated from this composure. In the course of this self-experiment, the anticipation of feeling unwell after spinning resulted in a very displeasing start for the day. Due to this, and to the fact that we usually needed quite some time to recover from spinning, we stopped. In the aforementioned conversation, the artist Joachim Köster emphasized how the reflection of dizziness and the memories connected to it shapes preconditions or beliefs, and thus the actual experience. We too found that the uncomfortable memories of being dizzy increasingly impacted our experiencing dizziness. Clearly, emotional conditions influence the experience of dizziness, pointing to its situational, temporal, and conditional character. However, dizziness is an experience that extracts from the habitual and thus, whether pleasant or unpleasant, may present a cathartic experience. Before making the studies, we already started to search for a narrative describing this erratic and startling nature of dizziness. To mirror its inherent unpredictability in another language, we created the poetic text, the band, and with visualizations of the 3D data, we created this booklet. And out of this text, the monologue, Dizziness is my name, appears. Or
emerged, yes.
Yeah.
And because you were talking about the voice, we can't hear it properly, but it's actually a female and a male voice overlapping. So also here we tried to achieve an in-between. Moments of dizziness, be it sudden staggering and falling, or be it an unexpected bend, or the startling inner feeling of dizziness emerging, dizziness always takes us by surprise. I'm sure everyone can relate to the experience of such a startling, unexpected change, something that pulls the rug out from under our feet and leaves us with feelings of profound disorientation or groundlessness. Now, considering dizziness, let us not separate the experience of groundlessness from the experience of ground. Living beings leaving off the ground is the topic of an essay by neuroscientist Israel Rosenfield, emphasizing a very simple evolutionary fact that he feels cannot be recognized often enough. Plants do not have brains. A plant does not have a brain. Only animals, and even very primitive animals, such as insects or worms, have brains. The brain, Rosenfield explains, developed with the living being's ability to move. Movement causes an incessant flow of sensations that is constantly changing, and thus experienced as unstable, chaotic, and overwhelming, and not only by us humans, but also by insects and worms. In this chaotic groundlessness, we need orientation to survive. The brain developed to help us navigate this chaotic world of constant movement, making sense out of chaos. So the brain integrates this incessant flux of sensations to create a stable, dynamic, and coherent flow of input. With Rosenfield, we could argue that our leaving the ground, our leaving our rootedness, created movement and chaos that we can only navigate with the help of a substitute for a root, that is, the brain. The brain as our root in the world is also one of the underlying themes of our photo series Atlas that developed already before this project, but then alongside, grew alongside this project. And it depicts humans holding on to the world, but at the same time physically supporting the world, equivalent to the ancient Greek figure Atlas. So our brain helps us orientate in this world, creating the world we perceive. It forms structure, coherence, and context. It makes sense, and to do so, it uses differentiation and it creates shortcuts, such as precondition, categorization, pattern, belief, habit, stereotypes, or prejudice, enabling us to make decisions fast and efficiently. Like this, the brain reduces complexity and allows us to interact effectively with our surroundings. Although that's helpful, we must come to realize that we think based on certain preconditions, beliefs, patterns, stereotypes, and habits.
Once significant changes occur, these formed preconditions, habits, and patterns can hinder us, especially when we are confronted with sudden, unexpected, and unforeseeable change. Overwhelmed by such change, we may then only reproduce the same habitual pattern and thought or behavior over and over again, unable to interact with the changed environment. We only have what we have, and there's nothing more we can do. Either this works or we are lost. Without a flexible approach, we will not be able to carry on. We lack a strategy. But how can we make for a new strategy? How to navigate the unknown? With regard to dizziness as a resource, We propose the destabilization of the learned and habitual by an agent of confusion.
Dizziness, according to Plato, creates the constitution of all philosophical thought by destabilizing the basis of knowledge to a state of uncertainty. Or, in the words of François Julien, oh, sorry, that's the words. It's only through this act of vacuation that philosophy realizes that it has a basis or foundations. It's these foundations which philosophy takes as evident. It's the implicit choices philosophy makes which constitute the unthought. Now, this notion of the unthought, let us consider it not only for philosophical thinking, and then this unthought. The unthought includes all the aforementioned preconditions, patterns, categories, habits, and stereotypes. Or instead of the unthought, American writer and activist Rebecca Solnit speaks of beliefs that inherently shape our worldview and actions. But both point to the basis, the foundations, or the ground of our thinking and acting. It's the implicit framing of our point of view. Now, dizziness shakes and shatters this ground, confusing and dissolving these beliefs and patterns. It confuses, in the very sense of the word, spreading perplexity and disorder. However, it is rooted in the underlying Latin term confundere, meaning to fuse together. And again, I would like to quote Julien. It's this phase when it's neither the one nor the other, this phase of confusion, dizziness, when both oppositions are possible, compossible, when there's no separation yet between the two. This is what I consider a resource, to think in the mode of the confused, dizzy, and not in the mode of the distinct. So dizziness confuses, makes all that seemed clear and definite fuse, blend, become blurred and unfinished, creating what Caroline Feiertag and we together have come to call a compossible space. An actual and theoretical space-time, a situation and condition that allow for the confusing and transforming what seemed clear and definite. The given and the lacuna, the possible and the impossible, ground and groundlessness.
From this existential confusion, novel perspectives and unprecedented possibilities can emerge. It is through the creation of a compossible space, a space-time for confusion, that dizziness can be transformed into a resource. Now, to clarify the notion of the compossible space, let us go back to the body and consider the movement of staggering. The experience of staggering and falling down is quite peculiar. From an evolutionary point of view, staggering triggers have reflexes that are very old and located in the lower region of the spinal cord. Yeah. When staggering, we instantly relax the unsteady leg.
So, you relax this leg?
And tense the other in an effort to regain balance. This reflex creates a space-time of possibility, a compossible space of falling and going on. Within the compossible space, all possibilities are present in their potential, foregoing their exclusiveness. They become compossible as possible together. Both potentials, falling and going on, become simultaneously possible, even though they are mutually exclusive. The staggering reflex affords us with an additional, albeit uncertain, option: going on. Without it, we must fall. Through this compossible space, we have added possibility of going on. The compossible space of staggering is a resource that every healthy human being owns. Therefore, dizziness does not relate to a theoretical concept only, but also to a physical, sensory, and emotional experience that shakes our patterns, beliefs, actions, and habits. Dizziness as unpredictable movement, at the same time ontological concept and symptom, method and object, sensation and metaphor, is apt to reshape unrelated or exclusive elements, but this requires a space-time to unfold.
Now, coming back to this conference and to balancing together, we would like to add that dizziness is a very volatile state, triggering diverse and contradictory emotions, comparable to a turbulent roller coaster ride where feelings of thrill, fear, and joy mix, overlap, and interchange in an instant. Dizziness in our lives, however, is of course not comparable to the foreseeable entering and exiting a roller coaster ride. And it is by far more ambiguous. At times we are seeing, feeling, hearing dizziness unfolding in front of us without being able to realize. We are baffled, perplexed, and in denial. Because acknowledging dizziness means admitting to a loss of control, means admitting to our vulnerabilities. Speaking of dizziness in the context of togetherness, dizziness always contains this surprise element. But this surprise element can be used as a manipulative tool, which is why we must take care to educate ourselves on dizziness. Dizziness can be a resource. But concerning togetherness, the question is, who uses it, to what end? Let me give you an example. I think everyone knows a person that we could call a drama queen, so someone who spreads havoc to enforce personal and egoistic goals. And without going into any psychological detail, just let me say this kind of action can be taken to a larger scale. And in today's Western societies, we localize many sources of disruption, disorientation, or possible disaster. As for now, I think we are only starting to see glimpses of a society where the power of emotions overshadows facts and reason. As might be expected, the destabilization of the shared space, be it a social or spatial space, is most terrifying to those who profit from stability. However, destabilization, or even the illusion of disaster and instability, can be economically and politically profitable. And we see it being used as a strategy to push an agenda. To give an example, and I know that there are many, I'm sure everyone has one on his lips, but just one example is the feeling of global insecurity and turmoil has weapon sales soaring without ever pacifying the feeling of the pending disaster. Here I'd like to quote Hannah Arendt. I'm sorry, I have it in German, and I'll give the quick translation in English. Ein merkliches Abnehmen des gesunden Menschenverstands und ein merkliches Zunehmen von Aberglauben und Leichtgläubigkeit deuten daher immer darauf hin, dass die Gemeinsamkeit der Welt abbröckelt und dass daher die Menschen sich der Welt entfremden und begonnen haben, sich auf ihre Subjektivität zurückzuziehen, meaning a recognizable decrease of human common sense and a recognizable increase of superstition and credulity point to the falling apart of communality and to the world alienation of human beings regressing into their subjectivities. So, how are we to win back togetherness in the face of spreading dizziness, discontent, and disorientation? Only the experience of sharing a sense of the world with others who look at it from different perspectives can enable us to develop a common sense, a sense of togetherness. Despite this existential condition of plurality, we must realize that the action in the public or in the shared and common space is by no means innate to human beings, but it is a capacity that humans develop, and it is contingent on aspects of human agency that relate to one's momentary condition and personality, to the momentary condition of the environment, and the characteristics of the space we share with others. Therefore, it is of critical importance to discuss and learn more about dizziness, togetherness, and about our options, balancing and navigating states of dizziness together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To follow our program, I would like to welcome at the floor Harald Katzmair with his lecture Taumel and Togetherness. Floor is yours.
All right. It's just like this. So, well, this is a very beautiful talk. Thank you so much. I think there is a lot of things I can refer to.
Excuse me, can you speak to the phone to the microphone for the
for the translators. So this one here better?
Yep.
Okay. So this was a beautiful talk. So thank you so much. I guess there is a lot I can refer to. Also, what I saw in the exhibition today. My name is Harald Katzmair, and I'm actually a social network analyst. So my job is to look at patterns in how people are related and learn about how societies work, what the dynamics are. And you will see what I tried to do in the next 35 minutes is to link this idea of dizziness with the notion of a society where togetherness could work. So what is, I mean, we've heard it, we live in those strange, precarious times where we face all those incoherence and fragmentation and conflict. And the question how togetherness can work and what kind of concept of togetherness we come up with is a decisive thing. And I would like to share some thoughts on that. So I would like to start with a quote by Scott Fitzgerald from the Crack Up. Of course, all life is a process of breaking down. Schiller was very fascinated from the sentence, the first sentence of his work. Specifically, he liked this, of course. Of course, all life is a process of breaking down. Eventually, we all are facing the moment. We all wait for the rendezvous with our own breaking down. And the thing is, when you look at this metaphor of the tightrope acrobat, and I just try to find out, is there a laser beamer included here? I don't know. Yeah, is there? No? Oh.
In the middle.
In the middle? Oh, here we go.
Yeah.
Okay, well. So this is Paul Klee's famous Seiltänzer. And I just want to share this one here because it has a lot of things that we can think about. Here you see more or less the path of our life. You see we go through doors, there's thresholds, and here is this balancing tightrope acrobat. And when you think about a tightrope walker, the very interesting thing is the bar. The bar introduces a horizontal moment. There's a horizontality. At the same time, the ends of the bar, as we know, are those forces of gravity that are pulling the bar down. When you think about it, what you have is two states of disequilibrium, two states of imbalance. There's the right bar, which is actually in a state of disequilibrium, and here is the left one. The only reason why it's stable, because there's a connectivity, it's coupled. So we have a coupled system of two states of disequilibrium. And this is the fascinating thing about life. Life is nothing else than coupled systems that are in disequilibrium. Think about walking, we've heard about it. It's two states of falling coupled. Because it's coupled, we can walk. That's like a basic idea of disequilibrium. Coupled are systems of disequilibrium. So we have this horizontal element, but you also have this verticality here, and Paul Klee does this nice job to outline those two thick lines, the vertical and the horizontal line. And this is interesting because my question will be, what is this metaphor of horizontality means when we talk about togetherness in society? What could be a concept for that? At the same time, when we talk about verticality, what is verticality in a community? What is the vertical or the horizontal dimension in a group of people? When we talk about the tightrope walker, we have to refer to Ashby's law. Ross Ashby was this cybernetic from the West Coast, one of the founders of cybernetics, who came up with this law of requisite variety, which is very important because to translate it directly into this metaphor of, or in this picture of the tightrope walker, what is the law of requisite variety telling us? It says if you want to have one variable in the system stable, if you want to keep it stable, right? You want to stay on the tightrope. If you want to have one variable in the system stable, all other variables need a lot of variability in order to manage stability. So stability only you get if you have variety. You need, and this is like only complexity can control complexity only, so the more turbulent our world gets, the more variety we need in order to keep things stable. This is what we can learn from the tightrope walker. This is the essence. So this is not an opposition between stability and dynamics or change. Excuse me. It's not here change and here is stability. This is a wrong opposite. You can only keep things stable if you have a lot of change, if you have a lot of variety in your system. So and again, my question is, what does it mean for a society? So how can we operationalize the idea of horizontality and verticality in the concept of a balanced togetherness? There's one question, and the other thing, what is required? What kind of variety? When we talk about variety, what do we mean by that? And is there a general mold that integrates all of those concepts and ideas? And of course, I mean, I'm kind of work on those kind of thoughts for a while. So let's jump into it. So why when we talk about togetherness, why is conflict and why are things complicated? So where humans are, drama will follow. Why is that? Why is that? Think about it. Two people come together, boy meets girl, right? For the first moment. Never seen each other. Two people meet each other. What a hell of complex stories are circling in the room. I've got a story about how I see the other person. I got a story in my mind how I think the other person perceives myself. And I got a story about how I see myself. So I've got 3 stories. And then there's 3 stories at the other side. So there's 6 stories in the room when 2 people meet. So now those are just the conscious stories. We know that there's our shadows, there's our splitter selves, there's all our thoughts that are unconscious. Think about here our shadow A, shadow B, right? We got 12 possible directions of projections and transference when boy meets girl, right? 12 ways how we can kind of project an illusion or a unconscious wish or what we like about the other one. It could be conscious and not conscious, how we see ourselves in this game. It's 12. I mean, and if you would include here also how we see ourselves, you have to, it's not minus n, it's n to the power of 2. It would be just 16 possible ways how energy and stories can be transferred. And now we're wondering why relationships are complicated or can be complicated. Just we talk about two people. Think about this room here. I mean, you can do the maths. I mean, like, I don't know, we're 20 people. Somebody here, I can do it, a calculator, 20 to the power of 2 here in this room. Someone can do the, anyway, it's like, yeah, it's a lot. Just in this room. So, and then there's another thing. Those dynamics, those relationships in projections and transferences are not stable. We go, every relationship, every link, goes through different cycles. I mean, think about, again, I mean, I keep those examples because then we understand it. Think about in new love. You fall in love with someone, right? There's not a lot of shared memories because you met, everything is fresh, and then you build up the relationship. Things are, and you add complexity, of course, right? Because all those kind of things start to build up. Out of this complexity starts this true sense of belonging, of partnership. And then there might be one moment where there's an irritation starts to kick in and there's crisis. And then there's this moment of like either there's this breakup or there's a renewal, right? If there's this divorce, people are nowadays on Tinder and they kind of start to kind of explore again and the new cycle starts. So, and you find those kind of cycles in every relationship, not just in a relationship with a person, but a relationship with our thoughts, with our convictions, with our habits. So we all have these dynamics, right? So it's complex, it's dynamic, and now there was this unbelievable guy called Paul Klee, the most underestimated person. Everyone knows him. You can see at IKEA, you can buy his paintings. I think nobody has ever, when I say nobody, I don't know, we don't have understood at all this unbelievable world of Paul Klee. And in his notebooks from 1923, he comes up with this mall when he starts to explore lines and the nature of lines. And we said, of course, all life is a process of falling. And you see what he's doing, how he kind of introduces different kinds of lines, active, medial, and passive lines. And of course, he uses the right metaphor. He talks about falling. It's like, I fell a tree. This is active. You're in springtime. You're full of power. I'm the one who's in mastery, and I'm in control over the world. I fell a tree. But then there is this medial moment where I start to fall. A tree falls under the axe stroke of the man. I fall. I am being felled. There is this moment where life is cutting us down. Right? There's this like Johnny Cash song. It's like, I think it's not live in this case, but it's okay. Something's cutting us down. And he comes up with this metaphor, with this infinity loop. And our topologist knows this could be a similarity with the Möbius loop, and the Möbius loop is a very interesting mathematical object. And he kind of discovers this process of activity, springtime, summer, peak of my possibilities, and then there comes fall, and fall literally. It's, by the way, similar structure like later. So, and he starts to really dig deep into these moments of cycles where things start, things come to an end. Those are like winter, spring, winter, fall, summer, right? The cycle, and he starts to draw those beautiful lines, and then he says, okay, but there is something that is the symbol of the cycle. It's the most appropriate and most or the best way to describe those dynamics, and it's the circulation of the blood. And he says, okay, what's happening? There's a moment where we regenerate the oxygen, we inhale, and then there is this moment where there is a degeneration. And you see he draws the line in blue, that's the degeneration part of the cycle, and we have a regenerating part. So there's two stages, two phases, so to speak, in the cycle. Well, and this is Paul Klee, and he comes up with this beautiful way to describe the beating of the heart, the way how our organism goes through cycles of regeneration and what he called degeneration. Well, this is exactly what modern systems analysis, modern systems ecology is studying. They're studying cycles in nature where things starts are out, you got here your pioneer species, and then you have a kind of climax change, and then firestorm is kicking in. You have a release stage, a destructurization stage, and things starts to reorganize. This is the adaptive cycle by Buzz Halling, and we have something like that in society when we talk about our technology. You have a startup, right? Think about a startup company, flow of capital, it grows, becomes complicated, big, boom, disruption, and then the moment of the deconstruction or destructurization kicks in. You have to explore new means, new ways of, I don't know, whatever you do, or you're out of the game, or you kind of just leave the field and do something completely different. And I'm deeply inspired by those smalls because of the simplicity and the beauty, but also the philosophical depth of them. And this is like another version of it by H.T. Autumn, where he says, okay, we have actually those, he calls it pulsing. It's a very beautiful aspect, but the pulses have different speeds, different scale. You have just a few very strong pulses. Think about a revolution or a really mega huge earthquake. It just happens every 100 years. But you have a lot of small earthquakes. So you have different scales, have different cycles, different pulsing. And this is how our things work. I have simplified it, and again, back to this symbol. I just want to share it with you. The X and the Epsilon axis, they have a meaning. They have a scientific meaning. It's not just like, it's more than a, but there's more, this kind of, this kind of graphics is simpler. And so, what you see here is like, okay, you start up, there's growth, there's a prime stage, there's a moment of disruption, and then you have a deconstruction, and then there is development. Growth and development, we have different stages. We call those RK, omega alpha stages. All of those stages have their own culture, their own texture, their own speed, their own phenomenology. What I want to point here is like, okay, here something becomes more. Think about the caterpillar. The caterpillar starts to eat, boom, becomes thicker and thicker, and then it's one day it just like cannot move anymore. It's like trapped in the skin, and then he cracks open the skin, and he transforms into a butterfly. This would be the development stage, right? So it grows and then it develops. So, and the crack and the moment of dizziness is always part of the cycle. It's, so to speak, it's a kind of absolutely requirement for moving from the growth stage into the development stage. The crack, the dizziness forces us to develop, forces us to become different, not forces us to become stronger when we experience a defeat. The defeat doesn't make us stronger, but the defeat forces us to become different. That's the kind of core idea here. And here now things become interesting when we talk about togetherness. What does that mean? This means that all of those different seasons and stages have their own characters. Like think about a script, right? You want to write a script about spring. Oh, you have the doer, the beginner, the activist, the energized young person, the 25-year-old startup person who is full of energy and da-da-da-da. So, and he's like, and here now you have like this growth stage. Growth means you exploit something. You exploit a potential that, as we will see, was created in this backward loop stage. Because that's why it's red, because that's where we take in oxygen. It's the dizziness and it's the backward loop that renews the potential that gets exploited here. Here you have the hierarchies, the bureaucrat, the controller, and here at this stage, the dizzy, the visionary, the artist, but also the cracked, the disappointed, the hurt mind, the traumatized person, the confused, or the fear-driven people. They're all up here. And there's no way to go through this cycle without therapy. That's why it's important that you have here our shamans, the therapists, all those who kind of are required that this backward loop, this renewal cycle actually can work. And this is like leads to the exploration stage. You have pioneering, but because here, yeah, I will come to this. Okay, so we have exploitation, exploration. And we need completely different social morphologies along the line. Because here you start as an individual, here you need the team that works together. Usually this is kind of like an organization and hierarchy. Once there's the crack, there's a lot of this moment of listening to yourself, or it's about being related with yourself. Again, team, community, network. This is just like, again, our concepts. This is an idealized model, just to give you a notion when we talk about togetherness. And of course, there is crack signals. We call this late K stage, by the way. This is when before the crack happens. This is like where things starts to kind of slowly move into something that's more discrete, that's like silent, that just makes a lot of noise. The fracture, the scratch, when you have, those are different kinds of cracks that are happening along the line. And I use those metaphors here. You have here the breakthrough. You start, and you break even. Here you crack up, you break down, and you're breaking bad, right? Because you have to try out new things. You have to go paths that nobody's gone before, right? But there's a lot of breaks and a lot of cracks and a lot of, for me it's also kind of funny, this one here. But it's like, and what were we doing here? It's new knowledge, growth, deepening, confusion, let go, unlearn, exploration. It's a learning cycle. It's the new paradigm, the mainstream, the paradigm change, not knowing, new combination. It's what life is about, what learning is about. That's it. That's the cycle. And you have it here in this and what's important here is just to understand that those cycles happen at different scale and different speed. That the pulsing is not, you have those cycles at the cultural scale, at the individual, at the organizational scale. I mean, every freaking minute, 30 million cells die in our body. Have you known that? You have to Google that. How many cells die per minute? There's like 30 million. Oh, per minute? It's a lot, isn't it? And then there are cells in our body, in our brain, that will die when the whole organism dies. It's born with this body here and dies with the body. So they have a cycle of 70, 80 years. And then you have, so it's like a composite of different vectors operating at different scale and speed. This is what organisms and networks are, and this is like all those cycles they go through. And of course, there are cycles of cycles. So at every stage, you've got, so it's a fractal model, just to make it clear. And then there are people say, isn't it a spiral? Yes, of course, but that's the beauty of a Möbius loop, that when you move along the edge of a Möbius loop, you always come back on the exactly other side. So you never come back at the beginning and at the same point. But again, you can also think it as a cycle. You can think it as a wild line circling through the cosmos. It's just a heuristic model. There's 4 really decisive moments where we can get stuck and trapped. Think about that. You want to start with something, you don't get it working because you're in a poverty trap. You don't have the capital, you don't have the resources to really let it grow, right? Locked potential. This is called poverty trap. Think about up here, you're already completely trapped in complexity, you're completely stuck, nothing is working anymore, but you just like wanna stay up here with all your power that you've accumulated over the past. You try to stay in summer, right? You try to avoid aging, you try to avoid changing, you try to avoid becoming. So, and here's this moment of disappointment, this moment of where the crack the crack up happens, and this is very important. When you're lost in pain, when you are down here and you completely still identify with this moment, we all know those people who tell you again and again and again, even after 10 or 20 years, that somebody was really unfair in their life, and they retell the story again and again, how something went wrong and it shouldn't have went wrong, and somebody. So this is what's happening here. You stay stuck here. And stuck means that you are not capable to go through the cycle, and this is when you cannot go through the cycle. You cannot renew. You're not able to balance. And here, in this alpha stage, you can't become lost in searching. There's a lot of people who try this and then they do that and this and always better. Never ever they come to the point where they say, yeah, that's it. This is my thing. That's the project I want to pursue. They just like endlessly circle around here in like exploring and exploring. So problematic. All those stages are waiting for us, and we know them. There's nothing wrong about each of those stages. They're just happening. The problem always happens when we stay stuck in one of those stages, when we try to avoid dizziness, when we try to avoid, let go, find something new, etc. I just want to move on because of time. So, of course, when you think about those cycles, we've already heard about that. Here in this stage in K, everything is kind of decided. It's the status quo. You've got a lot of stereotypes up here. And stereotypes like there's people we like, people we dislike, and then there's those people we ignore, those kind of clustering of humanity that we are trained in our world. Don't waste time with people you don't need, or there's just friends or enemies. That's the kind of instrumental way how we treat each other. That's why the world looks like how it works, how it looks. And it was Jakub Moreno who said, okay, those kind of stereotypes are like cans. And he was the founder of psychodrama and sociometric models. Worked in Vienna and till 1923, then he moved to the US. And why I'm coming up with them, and still I want to kind of, my attempt here is, we've got those dynamics, right? And we have seen that we want to have a model of togetherness, and at the very beginning I was asking the question of what is the vertical and the horizontal dimension in those configurations. And this now brings me to to Julien's notion of composability, because it seems to be clear that a society, a community that works, creates composable spaces for all of those characters. Because you cannot, who is more important? I mean, there's people we don't like or we like more than others. But how could you ever say that we just need pioneers or just entrepreneurs or just like visionaries? Think about only people like us would exist in this world. It's horrible, or just therapists. So we get the sense that in order to regenerate and degenerate, in order to grow and develop, in order to renew, we have to create spaces or have a society where all of them are part of their process with an understanding of that, and that's how a balanced togetherness could look like in my world or based on this model. So, but how can we get there? And this was Moreno's point. He said, look, the past when I think of a past, this is this sad place where we talk about what's happened, what went wrong, who disappointed us. Okay, good. Most times past, yeah, okay, was okay, but also, I mean, we're all at a certain age, something happened. And there is the future, and the future is this wonderful world with all our fears and projections and hopes. And Moreno said, you cannot integrate, you cannot overcome, you cannot create a place of composability in the past or in the future. It's just not possible. So we need them now. And this is what he called the encounter, die Begegnung. He wrote a wonderful book about the encounter, and he was the first person who was the inventor of the improv theater. And in the first district, in the Maciej, he founded an improv theater to observe, to watch. It was a scientific, but also a therapeutic interest. If we kind of start to improvise in the now, we co-create new scripts and new roles. So how to overcome existing roles. And the beautiful thing was we did role plays of this kind with children in the Wiener Augarten, where he kind of were working class kids were had their territory, where their playground, and with them he started to experiment about how can we overcome those existing prescribed roles, those scripts that kind of trap us and that trap us and keep us in our prejudices, etc. So, and this is what the improv theater was. And through the act of improvisation, through this act of co-creation, of a script, he said that's how we tap into the source of spontaneity. It's only happening in the now, only in the moment of encountering someone else. And this brings me now to what I call the horizontal dimension of your community. It's how we engage in the now. Is there an encounter? Is there a place of compossibility in the now? Is there something like that? And this would be kind of like the metaphor. Music is a beautiful metaphor because you've got all those different cycles of different scale and speed also in music. And I use it here as a metaphor, and it also has this verticality and this horizontal dimensions as in the graphic representation. Now think about it. We got the now, and now, what is if we have a shared place, but we have reoccurring encounters, and those kind of reoccurring, a cycle of shared encounters create the shared story or this kind of convergence of like a kind of shared purpose. The purpose emerges out of the encounter. It's what you call the purpose is something that comes out of her. So Moreno said that the spontaneity in the co-creation is also the moment of healing. It's a therapeutical technique. And I mean, just if we think about social media or the internet nowadays, we know that is a completely asynchronic or kind of encountering. It's out of time and space. We're never ever in the same room at the same time. Even if we're chatting, there's always a kind of delay. So this means that these places of co-creation and compossibility, this is what our society needs badly. And this requires from us that we understand that our job and our role in the cycle of renewal is a particular one. We're not covering the whole cycle. So is it possible that we move forward and see that the fragmentary perspective that we usually have when we think about a controller? I mean, we hate controllers, we hate hierarchies. Is this really smart? Is it why we are hating them? What is in our own shadow that we don't like? So about those who are in control or in power. What I want to say is each of those different roles and have their own narrative why they don't like others. And if there is any next step, evolutionary step in our completely, excuse me for the word, fucked up political situation, then it has to be to overcome those particularities, political particularities, because here you have more the liberals, right, the entrepreneurs, the conservatives. Here it's the autonomists, the egalitarianists, more the left, the renewal guys, those who renew society, the artists, those who keep society alive. Of course, are on the defense. Why? Because we only want to exploit, but nobody cares who is actually the ones who prepare the conditions, who are the ones who renew. This is something that are those who are in power sometimes, or most of the times, don't want to hear or see. That ecology, art, science, but also spirituality and those are the means where leisure, nature, ecology. So togetherness in this sense means that we need an understanding of all those roles. And the dizzy person, the frustrated person, the disoriented person, the person that gets cracked, smashed, that loses its sense of orientation is an absolutely also necessary character in this overall play. And what is the title of this play? The title of this play is Life is Variability and Process. It's about a well-discovered life. It's about how can we keep on developing. How can we keep on developing the adjacent possible? How can we keep on exploring, understanding? How to keep on to be alive, to feel a kind of aliveness? This is I think, the title of this play when we talk about togetherness. Togetherness of what kind? And this is just like an overview about those elements that are required to make those composable communities work. You need those cycles of encounter. This creates a horizontal line, like in music. You need them written, you need the cycle, you need the beat. You need the differences in terms of those roles. And of course, you need the shared purpose, and this creates this sense of shared journey. I want to stop with this one here. This is from 1914. We know what happened in 1914. Springtime, in the wake of World War I, Jakub Moreno. This is the theater space you see here, this theater space, and those are those who start to improvise, come together, work on a script, and we call this, the title is The Invitation to an Encounter. And I think this is the most important thing we have to work on. We need those spaces where we have a radical encounter, not between, I'm sorry to say, between guys like us. No, that's not enough. We need all of them in the room, all of them. And this must be our next thing. Everything else, I mean, if we try to just keep on to stay within our, even if we are convinced that we are right in that we are the ones who keep the world open, who keep the world accessible, who create oxygen for the future, which is true, this is not the whole story. And thank you for listening to my vision of a balanced togetherness and what role the dizziness has in this overall model of a community or society that works. Yeah, thank you very much.
As we move forward, and sorry, thank you very much for this very inspiring talk and presentation. And I have in mind, as I will provide later on the discussion, I have in mind a few interesting thoughts and questions. But follow our program as we are behind the schedule. I would like to ask you if you would like to see the video performance by Chief Judge, the Polish group, performer group. This video will be like 6 minutes. It's one of the latest performance group. Or we should give the voice to Markus Steinweg, and then finished with, before the discussion, finished with a video, as the video is not very deeply connected to the subjects which was developed here, but it will have get a notion for the tomorrow's presentation. So the question is open if you agreed. If we can do that before the discussion, we'll have a visual break for our own. But if someone needs refreshment, water or something, yeah. Without further ado, I will introduce Markus Steinweg and his talk. And so please, floor is yours, and half an hour.
So it's on? No. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Thanks very much. I'm very glad to be here. Thanks again for this invitation. Ruth and Leo and Caro, we met in Tel Aviv the last time, and and now here, and I'm in Warsaw, and I'm grateful to be here, and thanks for everybody involved in this symposium or event. Event might be a problematic term here, but okay. I'm invited to speak about topics I'm interested in. In fact, myself, dizziness, Taumel in German, vertigo, vertige en français. I'm half French, and then I think it was Ruth who mentioned the maelstrom. We can think about Edgar Allan Poe, of course, and we have to think about Giorgio Agamben as a contemporary philosopher who in Le Feu et le Récit, I read it in French, Das Feuer und die Erzählung, I don't know how it's translated into Polish, but in one of his recent books, there's a very beautiful text of Giorgio Agamben concerning the vertigo, the maelstrom, the strudel, and this very experience of like getting trapped by the ocean, being in the water. And the water is, we all like to be in the sea, swimming in the sea more or less, and then we make the experience that the sea is very strong and the sea is very unpredictable. And once I was in Iceland, and a friend of a friend brought us to the border of the sea, and he said, yeah, the tourists, they think, okay, that the sea might be their friend. And they like to swim, because we all like to swim, and we are so fucking romantic, and we like to be on the border of the sea, and I don't know, wherever, in the Mediterranean and Atlantic coast or wherever, but but the sea is not necessarily your friend. So, and this friend of a friend told me, the tourists, they just ignore what Icelandic people are telling them. Take care. Take care. You think you are able to swim, and you might be right. You are able to swim. You learned swimming, being a kid, and so on. But this is not a swimming pool. This is a fucking sea. And if you don't take care in specific times, and this is what I remember, the ocean takes you. That was such a beautiful, cruel, and beautiful and sublime expression. The ocean takes you. As you know, and some of us had read philosophy, I know, and the critique of pure reason of Immanuel Kant, or the third critique, not only the critique of pure reason, you know, the second critique is the critique of practical reason, and the third critique is the critique of judgment, Kritik der Urteilskraft. And in the first critique and in the second critique, the concept of the ocean appears. The ocean or the sea, and that means as a kind of image for, or kind of allegory for the sublime. The sublime, like you know, is not the beautiful, or so Kant with other people, Berkeley and so on, makes a clear differentiation or distinction between the beauty and the sublime, and the sublime is much closer to the experience of the sublime, might be quite close to the experience of the unpredictable, of what I call ontological inconsistency in the vocabulary of my books, and dizziness. I would like to start my remarks by focusing on a concept that was not so much mentioned today, as far as I got it in the, and this is a concept of experience. Expérience en français, Erfahrung in German, and I don't know how you say in Polish, but eine Erfahrung machen, making an experience. Faire une expérience en français. What does it mean? So it's not by coincidence that not only Martin Heidegger, but also Michel Foucault spoke about this concept of experience. The concept of experience is crucial for the whole work of Michel Foucault. And So faire une expérience, like doing an experience or making an experience, what does it mean? Maybe it simply means what Ruth already mentioned, and with Leo, of course, losing ground, losing your certainties, not knowing anymore where I am, where I belong to, losing my identity, making the very experience of the inconsistency of my identity, of the inconsistency of my knowledge. The question is not here, I'm not obscurantist, by the way. I'm not telling you there's no knowledge, there are no certainties, there are no evidences or no facts. I just come back from a symposium in Munich some days ago, and questioning the topic of alternative facts in the political dimension concerning Trump and Trumpism and the whole, let's say, non-philosophical vulgarity implicated in that. But again, facts are nothing but facts. So I think we have to continue being serious, not ignoring the history of philosophy of the last 50, 60, 70, no, even more, 100 and more years. Nietzsche died in 19, like you know. Nietzsche was born in 1844, he died in 19, and now, so he died 17 years ago. Before there were 11 years of dizziness, no, craziness, no, what, we don't know, it's not clear. How to, in German we say Umnachtung, so he went into a kind of darkness, into a kind of night, the night of, I don't know, dizziness, the night of insanity, the night of losing his mind. But who said that thinking does not imply before, in fact, you lose your mind? That the very experience of thinking does not imply the, I don't know, how do you say in English, the readiness, being ready, you know, the openness, the affirmation of the experience of losing ground, losing your consistencies. But losing your consistencies, losing your evidences, losing your certainties, losing the facts, I mean, the things that you are supposed to be, that are supposed to be consistent, or ordinary truths. I mean, this is how we orientate ourselves within this kind of generalized lack of orientation that Nietzsche's claim left for us by claiming God is dead. God is dead simply means, okay, the last, the final consistency, the final evidence, the final meaning, the final sense is lacking. Nietzsche never claimed that there's no sense, no meaning, no facts. Of course not. I'm sure everyone here read the Genealogy of Morals, and one of the last texts of Nietzsche. And this text, you might remember, there's a beautiful passage, and Nietzsche is claiming that he's inventing a concept, very beautiful, and I think it concerns our topic today and tonight or this evening. Petit fatalisme, he says. So, les petits faits, these are the small facts, let's say. Le fatalisme is referring, of course, on the concept of the fatum in Latin. That means on Schicksal in German, or destiny. So the whole classical onto-theological tradition, Christian metaphysic, how to say, onto theology, from St. Augustine on and before, of course, the idea of a kind of predestination or a teleological proclamation, so that it is already, that It's like that the idea that there might be kind of supermind, a super subject, call it God, the creator in the Christian tradition, that is like nowadays we would say the programmator, the one who wrote the program, and we are following the program he wrote, and if while Nietzsche is claiming God is dead, he's claiming that this programmation does not exist. We are really fucked up. We are really lost in freedom. And this is what Sartre, Jean-Paul Sartre, like you know, called, in French he said, nous sommes condamnés à être libres. We are condemned to be free. We are lost in this growing desert of nihilism, how Nietzsche called it, and that means the desert of nihilism, the growing desert of nihilism, is the desert of freedom. So we have to understand, and I remember that I'm sure everyone knows here what I'm claiming now, but just remembering what we already know, and sometimes there's a need to remember what we know, because nobody lives on the heights and the level of its own insights, and not me, not you, I think, nobody. And yeah, what does it mean? Maybe it's not enough nowadays to claim I want to be free, and because I want to, because I'm an emancipated subject, and I want to emancipate myself from the conventions and from traditional rules and so on, from the past and from the dictatorship of the cultural framework. I belong to the symbolic order, like Jacques Lacan would put it. It's a kind of authoritarian system, culture, language. So I never understand, by the way, why people sometimes say, I'm interested in culture. This is the most stupid claim you can make. I'm interested in culture. You are in the trap of culture. This is the point. And not being interested in culture, it's for me a complete misunderstanding of someone who didn't understand to think in a way. So no, culture, symbolic order, the tradition, our tradition, and so on. This is what we belong to. We are not. It's not easy to step out of that. We belong to that system of of established certainties, of established evidences, of established consistencies. So I like you already understood. I like this vocabulary: consistency, inconsistency. I wrote a book that is called Inconsistencies, in plural. Not because I like to lose ground, by the way, because me too. Me too. I don't want to lose the control of my life, and I want to be a subject. I don't want to be controlled by other people. I don't want to be objectified by other people as a man, as a woman, as whatever. I don't want. I don't accept this kind of ordinary violence that makes part of my everyday reality as a man, as a woman, as a kid. In this part of the world, another part of the world, it's complex. And I simply would say, is it sufficient to say I want to be free? And is it convincing if someone tells you I want to be free? And after having read Sartre in the age of 15, 12 or 14, like all of us, Sartre is one of the first philosophers, Nietzsche too, maybe you read when you're young, you know, and after having read Dostoevsky, you step to Sartre. And then Sartre is claiming, again, we are condemned to be free. So freedom might be a problem for us, even if we are claiming wanting to be free. Maybe we are lying. And why? Because the very experience of freedom is the experience of the abyss of freedom. And that's a second concept concerning the concept of experience. Experience, I want to tell something about. It's an experience. An experience is always the experience of an abyss. That means of the whole of freedom, like Sartre put it in L'être et le néant. L'être et le néant, being a nothingness, was published in 1943, if I remember well, and it's an important book, and people tell you, okay, yeah, Sartre misunderstood Husserl and Hegel and Heidegger. Yes, it's true, but out of this misunderstanding, he built up kind of strong, I think, convincing philosophical proposal. It's not more. Philosophy is nothing, never anything more than a proposal, and it's not up to us to be in a kind of dogmatic way. We don't have to, I don't know, to buy everything, by what Adorno said, what Judith Butler says, Simone Weil, or Gilles Deleuze, or Foucault, or whatever. But I would say dealing with these philosophical texts can help us to understand that all these philosophers that I mentioned, Simone Weil, Judith Butler, Adorno, I can say Heidegger, Schelling, Hegel, Sartre, others. All these philosophers are dealing with the very fundamental questions we are all dealing with, even if we are not reading philosophy. So, what is that question? This is the question concerning that I would like to connect with the concept of experience and the concept of the abyss, by claiming that a real experience is always the experience of the abyssal character of my reality. Who am I? And how am I as a subject, as an individuum, as a, I don't know, as a person, however we call it, after this whole long history of the deconstruction of these categories, not only in Derrida and Jean-Luc Nancy, of course, but Nietzsche and consequences, psychoanalysis and consequences, Marxism and consequences, the theory of alienation in Marx, the theory of not to fall down, you know. I like to speak about dizziness, but I need a minimum of stability to continue speaking. Yeah, and I would like also to come back later on another position, philosophical position, not to forget, and this is because I felt remembered by what was said before, and this is Wittgenstein, Ludwig Wittgenstein. But what I want to say, these positions I was talking about, these philosophers, they're all dealing with the question, who am I? How defining the position of the human subject within the reality order, the established reality order, in different perspectives, of course. Ontological perspective, let's say more cosmic perspective, or a cosmic perspective maybe. Nowadays we have to deal with contingency. A third term or concept I would like to bring on the table for a common discussion. So experience is the one, and but there's also the very idea of contingency, and also inconsistency and contingency. Contingency is a philosophical concept that indicates non-necessity. Sometimes it's translated like in German with Zufall, in French with hasard. Yeah, this is something that happens, the uncontrollable, the unpredictable. Yes, everything that is objectifying me or myself within my common reality framework, and so on. And so suddenly I experience what Sartre, for example, called in La Nausée, nausea, or how nausea is, what's the title in English? Der Ekel in German. So the very experience of, so do you remember this beautiful scene that this one of the protagonists, or the protagonist of the novel, Sartre, it's end of the 30s of the 20th century, and I don't remember, 38, yeah, 36, 38, right? And nausea, it's called in English, okay, la nausée. And then there's this scene that Antoine Roquentin, he is meeting a guy that he's meeting every day in the library, and he gives him, and he makes the handshake. Handshake is the most ordinary thing we are doing every day. You know, it's like the how are you? You know, nobody cares about how you are by asking you in the US, how are you? It's simply avoiding to take care. Yeah, how are you? And it's fine. Okay, and this is the same. And of course, with the handshake, sometimes we are this kind of if everyday politeness, let's call it politeness, a ritual helps us not to get too much in contact with the other and its otherness, disturbing otherness, and so on. Okay, and we know that, of course. And then suddenly something happened in this novel of Sartre that he makes this class handshake and like every day with this guy, and then suddenly he gets this feeling of ekel, nausea. So he's really disturbed, and he thinks that what he holds in his hand, suddenly it's kind of big, white, warm, or something disgusting, and so on. And this Sartre himself is using the concept of contingency, like okay. And so Sartre, long time before. So we have to refer on contemporary philosophy now also. I mean, speculative realism, Ray Brassier, people in contemporary philosophy, important people, I would say, Konrad Schiller and so on, dealing with kind of new, with the nihil unbound. That's the title of Ray Brassier. Or with a kind of a contingency that's not reducible to any register of sense and meaning. So, and we can find it also in the filiation of deconstruction of Derrida. Nowadays, Jean-Luc Nancy, who wrote very beautiful and very powerful text on the question of nothingness or the nihil. The nihil is simply another synonym for what I call the ontological inconsistency of the texture of our realities. The texture of our realities, but not only the realities outside of the human subject, but of course of the very reality of the subject itself. I mean, of us, of you as an individual, as a person. So there's a long tradition in the history of thinking that helped us to survive the quasi-knowledge of the death of God by ignoring it and by insisting, okay, God is dead, but at least there's me, and or there's God is dead, but at least there's art. And if it's not art, there's romantic love. So we are looking for a kind of absolute. And so romantic love is unconditional love. And if you watch Hollywood movies like me, you know that all the films with, I don't know, what's her name? Aniston? Jennifer Aniston. All the films with Jennifer Aniston are about romantic love. So, and this is a Hegelian dialectics. It's always the same. So, first you meet, you don't like each other because you're forced to meet each other, to work together in a project, in a college, whatever. Okay, then you're forced by objective reality, so the institution or whatever. Okay, to spend time together, and suddenly you remark you like each other, but the one maybe says, the boy, let's say, while drinking beer with his colleagues, he says, okay, I make her being in love with me. And finally, she is already in love, and she's falling in love with him, But he too is falling in love, but of course not really understanding because he needs more time. His brain is a bit slow, and because he's it's like this. And then finally, and she discovers after they kissed and they spent the night together or whatever, that it was just a kind of joke or kind of bad, and and then she's disappointed, and he needs really a huge effort to make to convince her that even if he was lying and even if she's right that he was not honest with her, it was finally honest, but he needed some time to understand. This is really the Hegelian synthesis drama. And finally, but the film always stops here, like, you know, and the Hollywood production. And who brings the garbage down after they married? You know, this question is in suspense, and it's not really answered. But I simply mean, romantic love is something, not simply something to laugh about and to think, okay, this is for stupid people, or I don't know, romantic, beautiful souls, like Hegel would claim it, or even the tradition of the Weimarer Classic and Goethe and so on. The beautiful soul is, I don't know, this is what we call narcissism nowadays, okay? You simply don't stand the inconsistency of reality and the cruelty of reality, and that the society does not give a shit about what you think and what you want and your desire and so on. So this is contingency. And finally you have to deal with the fact that God is dead means that nobody cares about you, even not your mother or your girlfriend or your boyfriend. And and then you go into this kind of logic of substitution. And this is what I'm very much observing, like you, of course. And so God is dead, choose a pet, you know. Okay, at least I have a dog. And so after I understood that God does not care about me because he does not exist, then I understand, okay, then I jump into art. And then I understand art is absolutely contaminated and corrupted by the art market. It's finally about money, okay. Then I think about romantic love. Then I understand that even in romantic love there's narcissism, and it's about pragmatism, narcissism. So it's never beyond instrumentalization. My girlfriend, my boyfriend, whoever wants something from me. There's a kind of demand. There's a kind of so in Walter Benjamin you can find this everywhere. Of course, this kind of or in Marguerite Duras, that the very idea of a contract and prostitution. I mean, the equivalententausch, the exchange of equivalences. That is in the core of capitalist economy. It's also in the core of romantic love, because it's also a kind of contract in economy. It's not totally beyond. Je ne peux pas imaginer la non-violence. I can't imagine the non-violence is one sentence that I kept in mind of Marguerite Duras. We all know the book, The Lover, and some of us might know the film, but the film is not so good, I would say. But I understand in a way, okay, Duras helped me to understand, it's about something, and that it is about something does not necessarily mean that it's about nothing. So maybe we have to develop a kind of more mature concept of love, art, and even faith, religious faith. I'm an atheist, by the way. But what I understood is, what I understood is that we are not ready to come back to the topic of our encounter, to use the word. We are not ready to give up the idea that, so God is dead. So, and suddenly the desert opens up, and I'm losing ground, and there's dizziness. The self-experience is not the experience of a subject grounded on itself, or being attached to, connected to a kind of supermind, the creator. and I'm created by the Creator, and the Creator must know why. Or like in Lacanian psychoanalysis, there's of course a kind of childish, infantile, narcissist demand concerning the analyst. You must know who am I. You know, this is the same in romantic love. The stupidity of romantic love has precisely to do with that. I'm in love with someone means I put all pressure on this guy, on this person. I'm very violent as a beautiful soul. Beautiful souls and narcissist persons are very violent. We know that because they will say, you have to recognize who in reality, who I am. You know, you have, it's your job to recognize my inner truth. So the inner truth does not exist. God is dead. There's nothing inside. There's emptiness. And this is a beauty and the possibility in the very condition, not maybe of romantic love, but of love in a more mature way. And that does not mean pragmatic love, and that doesn't mean romantic love. It means maybe simply to deal with the very experience of losing ground, the very experience of dizziness, the very experience of ontological inconsistency as the experience of myself, and now come to the concept of togetherness, and the experience of the gap between me and the others. Because I'm already not identical with myself, so there's space between me and me already. And then there's space between me and you, and me and you, and me and you, and you and you, and so on. And this space is the desert of freedom, with Sartre or without Sartre. And so I have to come to the end. I got a sign, but I just want to say, it's up to us. With Nietzsche also, without, we can say passive active nihilism. We can say, so there's so much space, there's so much emptiness, there's so much a lack of orientation and proclamation. I'm fucked up in freedom, and who helps me? I'm lost. Okay, this is pure narcissism. We know that. I'm lost, I'm the most, someone spoke with the drama queen, or you, the drama queen stuff. You know. I'm the most fucked up person of the world. Of course, it's never true. There's a fucking door. Go through the fucking door. And we all experience that, all with us, ourselves, all with friends. There's always a door. And if you reread Kafka for a moment, do it, please. You will understand that Kafka is claiming precisely this. Kafka is not saying there's no door to. He simply says, es gibt unendlich viel Hoffnung, nur nicht für uns. And that gives me hope. You know, that means there's an infinite amount of hope, but simply not for us. But this is for me a very beautiful sentence, because this is precisely tracing the topology of the situation after the death of God. We are in, after the recognition of, or the understanding that God is primarily unconscious, or like Lacan would put it, or simply the name for the inconsistency of the world. It's as such. So it's not, there's no door. There's a door, but the door is a kind of door. You have to go through the door, because to avoid simply to enclose yourself in the immanence of your narcissistic tautology. You go through the door, and the door is a carousel. Tür, it's a carousel, you understand? Okay, my English is bad, sorry. And then it brings you back, but in a different way to where you were. And this is what I call thinking, artistic thinking, philosophical thinking. And walking through the carousel door is a very experience of contingency, of inconsistency, and dizziness. Stop here.
If I can have our speakers to the table, I would like to open the discussion. Jaroslaw. Wow. Does everyone have a seat? Jaroslaw is missing. I hope he's not skipping that part. So the dinner is on, definitely is on, but it's on with all of us, otherwise we will not. So, shall we wait? I do not have any particular questions to singular presentation, but in some point it might refers to the particular talks, and of course I encourage our guests to participate as well. I don't claim the power of the table discussion, but so when Jaroslaw will arrive, I would like to point it that through those presentations, from the first one about semantics, the dizziness as a resource, the case of society and the structure of society, and the overview, the philosophical overview on dizziness and abyss experience, I have a notion that we received some proposals, as you, Marcus, say during your talk. We received the proposals from the understanding to practical, and to understand the system. But in my point of view, what is necessarily to understand, I would like you to in some point clarify, is that kind of abstract way of thinking in terms of a reality which is hardcore and dense, based on the ground, where that dizziness, disorientation, losing the ground, is actually happening in a social, political, and even personal scale, and how we can adapt from the dialectic and semantic reasons, how we can adapt the dizziness, the disorientations, and how the practice of artists, practical usage of the terms, and reworking the the terms, can be adapted in the real situation, as Harald refers to the whole system and how the system could operate. So from understanding to practical, how you will deal with the dizziness and disorientation, as Marcus proposed, abyss experience.
So from my point of view, there is not one solution to do that, because otherwise we do not get dizzy. Dizziness implies a certain state of being overwhelmed and out of control and having no idea how to go on. So I do not believe that there is like a recipe that we can apply for our personal problems to societal problems.
But yeah,
I think part of this answer for the question, I don't know, but I think education could be part of the question, how to bring this to the society. And this is also what I wanted to ask Harald. You said that not only we have to speak about dizziness or the cycles, but how that everyone from the entrepreneur to the controller and everyone has to be on the table. But my question is how to get this new audience, or how to get these people on a table. How is this possible?
I mean, there is, I think, a very important aspect that's linked with their idea of ontological inconsistency and the abyss of freedom, which is linked to or what is it that makes us receptive? I mean, as you know, in a Spinozian way, the power of a body is its capacity to affect the world, but also to get affected. So it's about the receptivity. And if we want to have a world with no dizziness, if this is the selling proposition, I want a world with no otherness. We want to have a world, this childlike world where others take care of us. And think about the political proposition over the last 250 years, that there's progress, that there is an increase in consistency, that there's an increase in order. So it's all about how to avoid the backward loop, how to avoid the crack, how to avoid the AAA, angst, ambiguity, anxiety, how to avoid it. We don't want to feel the feeling. I don't want that. Reject it. And through the rejection, you project it on the world, on others. And that's where we are. So whatever we do, and this is why I liked specifically, I liked all talks, but our last one, it's our, and again use this beautiful word, it's our fucking responsibility to carry the emptiness and the abyss. No one else will carry it for us. That's what's, how to create an environment, and this is something to do with philosophy, with the story, the narrative. We can't promise anymore that there will be no abyss. So this is one thing. The other thing is when systems are cracked, and there's something to do with the instability. Think about the pendulum, it's down here. Whatever we do in this room, it will wind up down here because that's where the point of gravity is. So whatever we do in this room, we cannot influence this pendulum. But once it's up here, a micro movement over there, a random movement down here has an impact on the pendulum. Why? Because it starts to become completely receptive. It opens up itself to the world. And this is where we are at this moment. And this is like this moment where in a system our actual change can happen for the better and the absolute worse. You always have both in those Cambrian moments. You have the ugliest, nastiest things at the same time with the most beautiful and inspiring things that emerge out of those situations, historical stages where systems are unstable, where ontological inconsistency that goes along with the instability makes our people receptive. They become, you can influence them. You have all their trumps. You have all the people that promise them the extinction, that they get rid of the otherness of the other, but also other things are possible. So it's about it's a moment of opening, and how to bring those people together. We need. I've advocated. There's several people together who try to come up with what we call a house of the future, where you create all those places of completely new types of co-creation. When I talk about co-creation, I'm not so much referring to design thinking. There's other tools and other means. And I see that there is those cracks also in the elites. I see that their receptivity and the readiness and the openness to participate in those kind of experiments is increasing.
But
Excuse me. Yeah, it's too much. Yeah,
dizziness, like the cracks, fueled the dizziness, or the dizziness fueled the cracks. And if the cracks are the positive way to overcome the crisis in general.
The crack is the opening. There's a crack in everything and how the light gets in. That's Leonhard Cohen. This is kill the light, kill the crack, and you kill the light, right? So the crack is you can also say it's the unfolding, the refolding, to use this Leibniz version. The crack is the opening, and again, our cracks encounter ourselves with fear, anxiety, and ambiguity. And if we cannot relate to those experiences and we want to get rid of them, everything that we push away comes back as a haunting, comes back as a ghost. And with billions of ghosts in our European culture, because we wanted to get rid of so many things over the last 150 years of trying to sanitize and clean up the otherness of ourselves and the world. And that's what we are. And our angst, ambiguity, and our ambivalence have to be our brothers and sisters we invite to the table and say, come on here, we don't we've tried to get rid of you, we've burned up the whole world, but trying to get rid of you, we have to invite them to the table and become a part of their conversations that we have.
Yes, I would sing the same song actually, ambiguity, or maybe from another side, that we have become a society of comfort. Comfort and happiness is what we aim at, but dealing with ambiguity and also what is the sense in happiness, we have to maybe think of John Keats' concept of negative capability. We have to be able to endure ambiguity, or the abyss within us, or the groundlessness that we are exposed to. Because with Isabel Laurie, if we don't train that,
right,
we really are in danger. We endanger ourselves by keeping us comfortable and easy.
But why not forgetting that it's a complex dialectic, ground and groundlessness, and it's not we now looking for comfort. Maybe it's a normal thing. Animals, like if there's too much sun, they look for shadow to survive, and it's not only we late capitalists or however, and these concepts of non-identity, let's call it with Adorno, non-identity or irreducible difference, or crisis. Let me say something about the concept of crisis. Now we have decades and decades. Now they became, of course, the adoration of these concepts, and I make part of this community of the people that are in the affirmation of more of difference than identity and so on. But now, of course, we have to come back maybe to Hegel in a way, and to say Hegel already spoke about the identity of identity and difference. So it was much more complicated already in the early Hegel, I mean, before the phenomenology of spirit. So in the Differenzschrift of he's already claiming this. So finally, it's the identity of identity and difference. That means it's not or identity, stability, or let's say non-stability, non-identity, and it's a complex dialectic, and then we can call it a negative dialectic with Adorno. But in a way, Hegel already had his own image or his own practice of negative dialectic. What I want to say is, it's like being open or being or to close, how to say it, to be conservative and to enclose yourself within your imaginary narcissistic projections or whatever. But things are complicated. This is also what psychoanalysis helped us to understand, that the ghosts are in the house, you know, and so you cannot keep them outside, because while reacting on them, you already affirm the existence within the house. So you're really already, like ex negativo, you're affirming the presence of what you try to keep out of your identity or your self-hood or whatever. So I simply mean the question is never or difference or identity or stability or instability and so on. And it's maybe also not like just looking for kind of harmony between both. It's more about accepting that maybe it's a kind of uncertainty relation, like with, sorry, now I use a huge term of quantum mechanics, of course, but simply accepting it's not possible for the same time with the same precision to localize in that. And for our discussion, it's not about an electron or I don't know, but it's more it's not possible for the same time with the same precision to take care or to focus on or identity or difference or the past or the future. I mean, for a political perspective. So to bring it in a political context, Richard Rorty and neo-pragmatism and what do I learn there? I think, and finally Derrida and Rorty, they came together and they understood, even Derrida had finally to understand that he's not so far away from Rorty because pragmatism has to do with affirmation of a faceless future. And then you remember, so to be a bit provocative, but it's not very much provocation here. But you remember when in the Bush administration, a reactionary government, and then there was Donald Rumsfeld claiming Derrida was still alive. You know, Derrida died in 2004, and Rumsfeld spoke about old Europe. And and Rumsfeld is not, you know, I'm a leftist, okay. But at the same time, I would say, I was so surprised that Derrida was one of the first ones being like shocked. I said, and I'm love, an unconditional love. I'm very romantic here. I have unconditional love for Derrida since I'm reading him since 30 years around, okay? But, this love will not stop. But that time I was a bit surprised. And why? Yeah, because it's true, old Europe exists. And old Europe is very masturbatory. It's always like going back to ancient Greek and reading Parmenides, Heraclitus. I did that myself, okay, in the game, okay. But then I understood there's the pragmatism and the neo-pragmatism, let's call it like this. Okay, and that means, okay, not looking for your identity in your past, the collective past, old Europe or Plato or Aristotle, blah blah, but to open up the door to a faceless future. And here there was also something right in the claim of this problematic guy Rumsfeld that I politically do not agree with him, of course, at all, but of course old Europe, also in art and visual art, it exists. And of course we are still working like this. And what I mean with the uncertainty relation is, we are focusing too much on the future, forgetting that we are quite much determined by the past, or we are focusing on the past, like in a traditional way, and forgetting that we are fucked up by a kind of faceless future, and never with the same intensity at the same moment.
Harald?
Maybe I can add something to that. I think when you look at those photographs that you've created, or when you're like in this stage of dizziness, when you look at those movements, they look like a dance. And when you dance, you kind of structure time, you beat time. You know, there's a rhythm in there. And I think that a lot of those kind of dialectical or tensions or dynamics gets resolved when you introduce the concept of the cycle or the ritual. What is a society? What is a ritual? A ritual moves you from state A to state B through their through the stage of indifference, the stage of liminality, how they call it in anthropology. So there's always like you have a stage where you are, where you know where you are, and your role is vital, it's full of meaning, and you sense that the purpose, as you said, and then you realize that this role, this vitality, because the whole constellation of the universe has changed, is wearing itself off. It starts to become shallow. It starts to become like incoherent, and then you get lost, and then you find hopefully a moment of consistency again, and you start with a new process is starting. I see it more like that, and I see more the whole thing as a loop, or you use this metaphor of the carousel, of the what is the
roller coaster?
Roller coaster. I think that's a very beautiful picture or metaphor for that. What I don't see is the time, the moment we are losing music. That's why I think music is this wonderful, you can explain almost everything using the music metaphor, because music happens in time, and it creates a movement, although we don't know what is moving through a symphony. We don't know it. I just know that it's completely relational, it's completely abstract, it consists of small, of fast and slow moving pulses. It has different speeds that are starting to interact and are in resonance with each other. And this is what one could call music, one could call life, or a society, or when you're in a group of people or a network that feels alive. And I think we have a criteria for rebuilding our fragmented, completely trapped society, obsessed with material goods and with competition. And that's, I don't know if our I see all those concepts of inconsistency, abyss, are being necessarily part of a process that always leads also to consistency, the experience that there is a ground, that something is carrying you, etc., etc. It's like this constant process of.
But then because we are circulating around very concrete ideas, and those follow to the idea of reason. And I actually, when I heard what you said and Marcus, and my first question, I have actually trapped in this traditional or rooted ideas. But what Jaroslaw during his talk presented and introduced the Dizziness as a method. New methodology, and using the Malabou's idea to escape from the reason. So maybe that's that we don't need to overcome or overpower the dizziness. Maybe we supposed to stay in a dizziness. That's my first thoughts. But then I'm wondering how. If we treat the dizziness as a resource, and semantics, how to introduce and translate in a global perspective or in global circulation the differences, as we experienced from the Jaroslaw talk, that it was already a barrier for us as well. So how to combine and how to maybe open the dizziness and find a completely new meaning. And do you reckon that the art field and the artists could provide the structures and the tools to provide the new meaning of dizziness, understand across the global scale?
So I'm just looking for a name. Who was it that called the artist today as Artiste sans frontières? Oh, Gabriel Rosso. Yeah. Okay. So I don't think I'm an artiste sans frontières. I have my boundaries, my frontiers. So that's for one.
I think we spoke about dizziness as a resource, but I think we have to mention that there are only very few space-time moments when it can become a resource. And we have to trigger this moment, and this is what we have to do. But in the most cases, it is not a resource.
And then again, if we use it as a resource, and in a societal context, we have to ask who is using it and what for. You know, because we see spreading disorder for political reasons, to gain a political control or for an economic gain. We know that even of catastrophes like Hurricane Katrina, there are enterprises who made a really beautiful income out of that. So we have to be really careful about dizziness as a method, if it can be a method, and I'm not sure it can.
When we think about the dizziness as a resource, I think that we could rather also think about immersing in it. And this idea of Malabou's a different rationality could be somehow built with this immersion. So the question then could be if we can think not only with concept or even without concept, but with the proper names and with metaphors, and how far could we go with this method of metaphorization you in a way assumed in your project to somehow counterbalance this tradition of conceptual thinking. This is my the question that I think that this kind of different rationality could be built on this. Through the immersion in the dizziness, that could be a crack, but I think what would be interesting would be producing a crack that would somehow crack the patterns you presented to us. So can we imagine a crack that somehow dissolve this pattern as you presented somehow? It might be found in every process, right? That every process has this shape. Can we imagine a process with a different shape? So that the crack would be really a breakthrough. Then the Möbius strip is somehow dissolves, right? So I think that Malabou wants to, from us, thinking that it's not based on tradition, not only based on reason. So we somehow need to recreate reason and the way we reason, the way of reasoning itself. And in that sense, I find your project as a kind of exercise in it. But of course, it's an initial kind of phase. So we have the first exercises, and we are not sure where they can lead us. Really.
Are they? So maybe I should give back the voice to the audience. If there is any comments, questions, just raise a hand, and I will come with a microphone. Nothing. Yeah.
I was very much intrigued by the different drawings we saw today. For one, your spiral drawing of the dizziness going down, I guess, down. And then your drawing of the line 8, as you describe it, being a process, any process, or at least cycle. And I thought that in dance, yes, there is this energy coming towards you, and that energy actually leads you to go back into the next energy, and the physical movement of going backwards and forwards but you have to know what happens. As if you don't know how to dance, you won't dance. So, what I came to think about during these, just the two layers of drawings, if you lay them on top of each other, could we maybe learn from that? Does it mean that we have to actually see, you have to know what comes, otherwise you can't go back. If you forget that in this drawing, you have to go back into that direction, you will go down, deep down, yeah? And there is where the crack maybe appears, and I think that's probably also the problematic idea of this drawing. If there is a crack, there is no going back. Wouldn't you agree?
I'm not sure if I've got you right. That's all. So I mean, a crack is just an interruption, right? So a crack is, as I said, forces you to change to become, to change, to transform. It's not something that you can't continue. That's the crack, first of all. And so there's an interruption. An interruption is the call to adventure. But first, the crack is traumatic. The crack is painful. You feel small. You feel wounded. And so there's like you start to first identify with the crack, because this kind of links you to the consistency you think you had before the crack happened. So you start and therapy just means that you move on and get out of the trap of the fixation from the crack. Although the crack itself, as Lacan would say, you cannot experience it anyway directly. It's always just like already the narrative of the crack. The crack itself has no concept. This crack itself is not a symbolic or it's not a signifier. It's something that's radically other. So what I want to say is and now if you are in a culture, and now I'm talking about culture or cosmology, and you can, if you talk about I really strongly recommend to read Blackfoot's Physics. It's kind of a beautiful description of the Blackfoot's language and culture from the perspective of a quantum physicist. Blackfoot's Physics. If you have like a culture where it's absolutely clear that those cycles are happening, but the circle is never a closed circle, because the absolute chance is possible in this society. But you know that there is like a next door. You know that this is this brings you to the concept of faith, or that there is a projective energy in this society that says, no, we're gonna move on. There's a sense of directionality even in the moment of this, where the incident is happening. But we are completely, definitely tend to either completely sanitize the crack, so it shouldn't happen, it doesn't happen. The others, it's just like that's why or we literally leave those who are cracked behind. I mean, we talk about this is the age of the creative destruction, the Schumpeterian metaphor, but what's about those who get destructed? That's why deconstruction, destructuralization is a better word. If you destruct someone, he's dead. He's just like out of the game. And that's why solidarity and therapy is part of the renewal cycle. That's why we need solidarity. That's why we need togetherness. That's why we have to support and help each other in a moment where you're cracked. I hope that there's love, there's friendship, there's someone who holds the space that helps you to get over the fixation of being identified with the crack, that you are the crack. So what I want to say is, how do we appreciate the renewal cycle, which consists of solidarity, of community, of therapy, of, let's say, of art, of philosophy, of all those beautiful things that help us to, let's say, find a narrative around the fact that we're making experiences. And experience means that you get something that you don't want.
Is there any other comments, questions?
Yeah. I would like to make a remark concerning the crack, and okay, and we know the reading of Deleuze, Scott Fitzgerald, the crack up, and also pointing out that because François Julien was mentioned today, and so a philosopher that is dealing with old Chinese, traditional Chinese thinking and deconstruction of European Western thinking from outside, not like from inside in the like Derrida, we know this title of the book of Julien, Les transformations silencieuses, so silent transformations, so little cracks, little, you even don't remark. So because I'm here a bit, I just want to problematize the immediate connection you made between the experience of, the real in the Kenyan sense, what Jacques Lacan calls le réel, pas la réalité, mais le réel, the real that is precisely the something you cannot integrate into the symbolic texture and the the imaginary and self-understanding, blah blah, and the experience of the real can be experienced as not necessarily traumatizing. It can be in transformation silencieuse, and this is maybe something we have to keep in mind, that there's more than one mode of the experience of the real or the total crisis. I said I come back to the word of crisis just for a moment, because I like the word so much, because it's such a word. It's absolutely in the media constantly. There's Griechenland in Germany, Griechenland Krise, or then you have another refugee crisis and so on. Oh, it's a crisis, and and crisis is the ancient Greek word for the decision, but also for the situation that demands a decision. So, and as long as you can react on this demand, you're not totally like lost or traumatized, because you understand, now I have to take the responsibility in a situation, that maybe implies experience of a kind of vertigo, dizziness, lack of knowledge. I know I have to make a decision, maybe let's say in love or something. You are in a relationship, you love a person, you are together since 10 years, let's say, something like this. And then you understand there's a crisis, and the crisis simply means you cannot continue like you did before. So there's a decision demanded, and the decision implies the possibility, to stop, to, like you showed in one of your diagrams, to break up and to say, okay, we cannot rebuild it, or there's no reformation anymore. There's simply the only thing we can do for us is to stop. And there's a beauty in this too. And sometimes it's a symptom of love. You continue loving someone by stopping being with him or her, and that too can be clear, proof of love. But I mean, here to stop here. But crisis, the experience of crisis, the experience of a situation that is very demanding and maybe overwhelming and maybe too much. So, but nevertheless, I have to decide in in the undecidable, like Derrida would call it, of course. But then there are also these situations that are less pathetic, less dramatic, less visible in a way, and this might be the experience of this transformation silencieuse. You even don't remark it, but not because you are stupid or not sensitive, but it's simply à la longue or à la durée or something like this. And I just wanted to note this, that this might be a point to think about too.
As well in Lacan, I would like just say that what we are lost in our discussion is jouissance, actually. That there may be pleasure, a surplus of pleasure in being dizziness. And I think that we shouldn't lose the pleasure, jouissance, or seduction part of these experiences, because I think experience is not only what we don't want, but also what we would like to have, or we imagine could happen to us. So I think what can bring us together is also this kind of immersion in pleasure, participating in that, sharing jouissance and things like that. And of course, when you say that you can stuck with some position in your diagram, you know, Lacan and Freud says you are stuck because you find pleasure in repeating your pittiness. So maybe you need to have more pleasure that would like some free or from your symptoms, and if you can enjoy your symptoms, then you can go forward. So I think that we could because I think that in your work there is a lot of fun also. So I think we shouldn't think about dizziness only in terms of crisis, but also in terms of festival, enjoyment, and this dangerous thing as jouissance is.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a useful question, but I would like to focus on, you mentioned it several times, ground and groundlessness. I would like to focus on this. What means ground for you, and is it more when you are balancing that the ground is also moving some kind? Like when you are having this example with the tie rope. The tie rope is the ground, and I'm nervous, I'm sorry. It's moving the whole time, and balancing means also in combination with the stick. It's also moving, it's not just like this. So it's not just me who is balancing, I'm balancing with the ground, with the rope, with the stick in combination. And when we are saying we are losing ground, do we really lose it? Or is it just shivering for some time, like on a ship? But we don't know really who is shivering. Is it us? Is it the ground? Is it stable, like here? So we can say we are standing on stable ground at this moment. But when I'm dancing, spinning around for a very long time, and I'm kind of depending on my feet, I'm really aware of the function of my feet. So I'm not quite sure where I want to go with this question, but maybe we can, or you can tell me your opinions or your ideas of ground and groundlessness and something in between, maybe. Yeah.
I think I would like to answer your question from the bodily aspect, and we spoke about the inner ear and the cochlear, and you get dizzy when the sensation you got does not fit together. And so I don't think there is groundlessness and ground. There's always, it is between, and there is a movement between groundlessness and ground. And this is where dizziness can appear.
I think I would say it differently. I think ground is when we have this idea of security. There is a speciality, like a sickness in children. There are certain children who are afraid of jumping, or who do not enjoy when you throw them in the air and catch them again. And this is a very normally for children, this is an important part, that they are thrown in the air and gravity brings them back and they are caught by their parents' hands. This is this gives enjoyment of the insecurity, and then this relief of being caught again and being grounded. So I think of ground and groundlessness in terms of the ability to fall back on my feet, maybe.
So, in my worldview, there is no, there's no ground. It's just like objects that have a different velocity, different speed of renewal. When you look at this room here, what is the fastest variable here? It's us. We come to this place here. We are gone in like 30 minutes. The chairs here, they might stay here for 1 day, for 2 days in this position. Then you have the electric cables here. They get replaced every 5 to 10 years because then they are old. Then you have, and then you have the building itself, the walls. And they're like, how old is this castle here? 200, 300 years, whatever, right? So you have like in this room here a composite of completely different because this is at the atomic level, everything is fluid, it's just a process, right? But this is a very slow process in our experience. And we're losing ground when a slow variable starts to become a fast variable, like in an earthquake. And things start suddenly to shake. If the ground always would shake, we would adapt to it, right? We would have other points of reference that are slower, like the stars. The stars are like you have a very clear structure of how stars every night through the seasons reappear. But although the Blackfoots, they say just because the sun arises every day doesn't mean that tomorrow it also will arise. So there will be a day in their world, in their cosmology, where the sun will not rise again. And they're right about that. So what I just want to say is groundlessness is more a relation between when you expect a slow variable that turns into a very fast-moving variable, and then so everything is moving and shaking, but just at a different beat, different cycle.
We can agree that we reach the point where we get the sense of dizziness and the sense of balancing togetherness, or maybe not the sense itself, but the idea how to approach the balancing togetherness, and maybe that's the solidarity, collectiveness. It could be one of the things which helps to keep the balance again. But I would like to, as there is any other questions, I would like to thank you for today. Talks and presentations. I hope you find them inspiring, as I did, and I probably will process them still in my mind tonight. And I would like to finish our first day, and we'll welcome you all on tomorrow at 11 in the same room. Thank you very much.